Hi all, welcome to the presentation of the poem The Canonization written by John Donne. Before moving to the poem, let's have a look at the poet John Donne. John Donne was born in London early in 1572. He was an English poet, scholar, soldier and secretary born into a Catholic family, a remnant of the Catholic revival who reluctantly became a cleric in the Church of England. He was Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. His most famous and most solemn sermon, Death's Deo, was preached before Charles in 1631, the year in which he died. He is considered the preeminent representative of the metaphysical poets. His poetical works are noted for their metaphorical and sensual style and include sonnets, love poems, religious poems, later translations, epigrams, elegies, songs and satires. He is also known for his sermons. Donne's poems were not published till 1633. His biography was written by Isaac Walton in 1640. For long, Donne was regarded as an obscure, eccentric poet. His rediscovery and influence on modern poetry date from the publication in 1912 of Dr. Herbert Grigerson's famous edition of his poems. Donne's poems may be grouped generally into two: his songs and sonnets, which he wrote when he was a young man in his early 20s, living in London as an Inns of Court man, and his religious poems, which he wrote after he had taken holy orders. His songs and sonnets, 55 in number, consist mainly of youthful love poems and satires. These love poems are full of brilliant cynical wit. They were a reaction against the prevailing patriarchal faction of adoring a remote, disdainful mistress. Donne's religious poems include 19 holy sonnets and hymn in praise of God, including a hymn to God the Father. They reveal high earnestness and intense religious devotion. They are the expression of a desperate and troubled soul. Thus, there are two Donnes: the adventurous young man full of clever wit, savage satire and shocking originality, and the somber churchman full of religious devotion and an intense desire for divine mercy, much possessed by death. Donne and Metaphysical School of Poetry. The term metaphysical means beyond the physical. Literary critic and poet Samuel Johnson first coined the term metaphysical poetry in his book Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets. Donne has been looked upon as the leader of a group of poets who began writing in the first half of the 17th century and come to be known as metaphysical poets. The others of this group were George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, Andrew Marvell and Abraham Cowley. It was Dryden who first said of Donne, "He affects the metaphysics." Later, Dr. Johnson in his Life of Cowley applied the word metaphysical to all those poets who belonged to Donne's school, a word which has stuck to them ever since and gained a permanent place in English critical vocabulary. Earlier, Pope has also referred to the metaphysical style of Donne. The word was meant to be one of disapproval, and while applying it, these critics had in mind a habitual deviation from naturalness of thought and style into novelty and quaintness and abundance of far-fetched imagination, which were to be found in the works of these poets. It is in this sense of using remote, out-of-the-way thoughts and expressions in poetry that Donne is regarded as a metaphysical poet. Donne's metaphysical poetry reveals a depth of philosophy, a subtlety of reasoning, a mingling of homely and sublime, the light and the serious, which make it full of variety and surprise. Imagery, a distinctive feature of the metaphysicals, is extremely breathtaking, far-fetched and fantastic in Donne. Wit was the main feature of Donne's poetry. A modern critic, Lessing, regarded Donne as the monarch of wit. Donne used conceits in all his poems. The poem Sun Rising is replete with such conceits. The poet exhibits all his learning and metaphysical wit in expressing contempt for the sun. In the poem Pickwickham Garden, the lover's tears are the wine of love. Instead of preferring the smooth flowing lines, he often preferred those in which the accents have effect of shock, pull up the reader and awaken his attention. Characteristics of Metaphysical School of Poetry. The main characteristics of Metaphysical School of Poetry which may be found in Donne's poems are 1. Novelty in thought and expression, 2. Union of feeling and intellect, 3. Learning, and 4. Harshness and obscurity. The metaphysical poets did not follow the trodden path. A revolt against the contemporary fashions of poetry, metaphysical poetry individualized the prevailing religious spirit and revolted against the Renaissance softness, smoothness, and sweet expression. It wanted to express new thoughts in a new way. It reveals a union of mind and soul, of thought and emotion. Metaphysical poetry is largely lyrical. In subject matter, it is religious and amatory. It explores the remote aspects of human consciousness. Metaphysical poetry is analytical. They copied neither life nor nature. They were great wits, for wit is a combination of dissimilar images or discovery of occult resemblance in things apparently unlike. Their courtship was void of fondness and their lamentation of sorrow. Their wish was only to say what they hoped they had never said before. The style of metaphysical poetry is passionately urban, harsh, hard-surfaced, and granite. It is packed with affections and conceits. The language of the metaphysical poets are contemporary. Their rhythm, which is as intricate as their thought, is a stimulant to the intellect. The rhythm of Donne and his followers emerge from meaning. Their poetry shows wit, conceit, euphemism, intellectual realism, dramatic element, language and rhythm, and the love of science and philosophy. It has obscurity, subtlety, and comprehensiveness. Its intellectual and analytical approach is conventional. We find psychological realism, deep humanism, doubts, and anxieties. The metaphysical poets were men of great learning, wide-ranging scholarship, and wide experience of life. They were capable of exploiting their scholarship and experience to poetic purpose. There was no area of experience which they considered unfit for poetry. Their poems abode in scholarly allusions. Allusions to theology, astronomy, medicine, the law, natural history, and classical mythology are frequent in Donne's poems. Donne's poems create the impression of harshness because of the metrical roughness of some of his lines and his violent departures from the rhythmic pattern. But this is the result of his deliberate attempt to avoid conventional poetic sweetness. Apart from this unconventional style, an important factor that contributes to Donne's obscurity is the combination of dissimilar ideas without attempting to unite them. To sum up, Donne's poems are characterized by much genuine poetic feelings, harsh meters, the subtlety of their wit, and whimsical images and terms of speech which are called conceits. Now, let's move to the detailed analysis of the poem The Canonization, written by John Donne. For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love, or chide my palsy or my gout. My 5 grey hairs or ruined fortune float, with wealth your state, your mind with arts improve. Take you a course, get you a place, observe his honour or his grace, or the king's reel or his stamped face, contemplate what you will approve. So you will let me love. This canonization, written after the accession of King James I in 1603, is well-known love poems of Donne. According to Professor Grigerson, the poem reveals Donne's Platonic strain of love. Another critic, Theodore Deadpath, says that the canonization expresses Donne's positive attitude towards love and woman, showing satisfaction in love relationship. It is said that the poem was born out of poet's love for Anne More, whom he loved passionately and devotedly, and elopement and subsequent marriage which ruined his fortune. This is one of the famous love poems of Donne in which he canonizes the lovers. The lovers reach sainthood through love. Here don't reject worldly arguments against love, which in its otherworldliness is compared to religious experience and leads eventually to the lover's canonization as saints. For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love, or chill my palsy or my gout, my 5 grey hairs or ruined fortune float. The poem begins with an aggressive abruptness. The poet asks the world to stop advising him against the love. The poet wants to be left alone so that he may love in peace. The world may blame him for his palsy or gout or his enfeebled senses, 5 grey hairs. They may mock at him for his foolishness in ruining his prosperous secular career through this indiscreet marriage. There is a reference here to Donne's secret marriage in 1601 to Anne More, niece to his employer Sir Thomas Egerton. With wealth your state, your mind with arts improve. Those who advise the poet to give up his love should mind their own business. Let them improve their estate with wealth or their mind with arts. Take you a course, get you a place. They may follow a course of studies or take up a job, a place. Observe his honor or his grace. Let them acquire a position of importance by cultivating a lord, his honor, or his grace, or a bishop, or the king's reel or his stamped face. They may attend the ring at court or amass wealth. They may frequent the court or go in for money making, or the king's reel or his stamped face. Contemplate what you will approve. There is a reference here to the coins which were stamped with the face of the king. Such coins came into circulation in England after 1603. The people of the world may occupy themselves in various ways. So, you will let me love. They may try whatever they wish provided they allow the poet to love in peace. Alas, alas, who is injured by my love? What merchant ship have my signs drowned? Who says my tears have overflown his ground? When did my coals a forward spring remove? When did the heats which my veins fill add one more to the plague bill? Soldiers find wars, and lawyers find out still litigious men which quarrels move, though she and I do love. The poet affirms that his love is perfectly harmless, so that no one in this world can object to it. Alas, alas, who is injured by my love? No one is injured by the poet's love. What merchant ship have my signs drowned? No ship is wrecked by the heavy sides heaved by the poet as a result of his love. Who says my tears have overflown his ground? The tears produced by the poet's love do not flood anyone's ground. When did my coals a forward spring remove? The coals of his love have not injured the farmers by retarding the spring season. When did the heats which my veins fill add one more to the plague bill? The heats which love fills in his veins have not added a single name to the list of casualties from the plague. Soldiers find wars, and lawyers find out still litigious men which quarrels move. The poet's love has not thrown soldiers or lawyers out of their employment. Wars still exist in spite of poet's peaceful love, and therefore soldiers are still employed. Litigious men who stir up disputes may still be found, so that lawyers continue to get work for themselves, though she and I do love. In short, the affairs of the world are no in way affected by the poet's love, and therefore the poet wants to be left alone to love in peace. Call us what you will, we are made such by love. Call her one, me another fly. We are tappers too, and at our own course die. And we are in us find the eagle and the dove. The phoenix riddle hath more wit by us, we two being one are it. So to one neutral thing both sexes fit, we die and rise the same, and prove mysterious by this love. Call us what you will, we are made such by love. Call her one, me another fly. We are tappers too, and at our own course die. The poet says that he and his love have been made what they are called by love. They may appear insignificant in the world's eye. They may be called flies, at the same time they are tappers too. As flies or moths they circle the taper's flame and are thus destroyed by each other. As tapers, they are burned and are self-consuming. And we in us find the eagle and the dove. In them there is a combination of eagle which symbolizes strength and the dove which symbolizes gentleness. They find in each other the most tyrannical and gentleness of beings. Their two souls are fused into single metaphysical entity. The phoenix riddle hath more weight by us, we two being one are it. So to one neutral thing both sexes fit, we die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love. The two of them being one are the phoenix. They impart sense to the riddle of the phoenix. Their two sexes fit together so perfectly as to form a being of no sex, and after they die they come to life again and become the same being that they were before, just as the phoenix rises from its own ashes. What done mean is that he and his mistress are continually revived after being consumed in the flame of passion. Their love makes them a mystery worthy of reverence. The phoenix is a fabulous bird which burned itself to death every 500 years and rose anew from its ashes. Only one such bird existed at a time. We can die by it if not live by love. And if unfit for tomes and ears our legends be, it will be fit for verse, and if no piece of chronicle we prove, we will build in sonnets pretty rooms, as well a well-wrought urn becomes the greatest ashes as half-acre tomes, and by these hymns all shall approve as canonized for love. We can die by it if not live by love. The poet says that they can die by love even if they cannot live by it. And if unfit for tomes and ears our legends be, it will be fit for verse. If the legends of their love will not prove a fit subject for history, it will be fit for poetry. And if no piece of chronicle we prove, we will build in sonnets pretty rooms. Even if they do not find a place in the chronicles, they will live in the insubstantial sonnets. As well a well-wrought urn becomes the greatest ashes as half-acre tomes, and by these hymns all shall approve as canonized for love. A well-wrought urn is suitable for the ashes of great men who may be buried beneath huge tombs. But the lovers do not wish for such fine memorials. Their legend or story will make them canonized for love. Their love songs will be hymns of a new religion of which they will be the saints. Moving to the last stanza of the poem, and thus invoke us, you whom reverent love made one another's hermitage, you to whom love was peace that now is range, who did the whole world soul contract and draw into the glasses of your eyes, so made such mirrors and such spies that they did all to you epitomize. Countries, towns, courts beg from above a pattern of your love. All those who look upon the lovers as newly canonized saints will request them to pray on their behalf, and thus involve us, you whom reverent love made one another's hermitage. Their lovers have found a religious hermitage in each other through their sacred love. They have found in each other the calm fulfillment which transcends the customary conflicts of love. You to whom love was peace that now is range, who did the whole world soul contract and draw into the glasses of your eyes, so made such mirrors and such spies that they did all to you epitomize. The soul of the world has been extracted and driven into the mirrors of their eyes, just as an alchemist makes an extract by sublimation and distillation, driving it through the pipes of the still into the glasses or the vessels in which it is stored. These lovers have made themselves self-sufficient in the knowledge of the world, since everything in the world is to be found in each of them, for they are each a world. Countries, towns, courts beg from above a pattern of your love. All the other lovers who realize the unique nature of the love of these canonized lovers will request the Almighty to give them a pattern of their saintly love so that they may also love as these lovers did. In short, all other lovers will like to imitate the model of sacred love which these lovers have set up and through which they have become saints. The poem is based on a paradox. The paradox is in the sense that the poet daringly treats profane love as if it were divine love. The lovers have not renounced the world and the pleasures of the flesh. They indulge in the joys of lovemaking, still they are called saints. Donne succeeds in establishing that devoted lovers like the poet and his beloved are saints, for they have renounced the world for each other, and the body of each is a hermitage for the other. They are as devoted to each other as a saint is to God, and they may rightly be called saints of love. The poet subtly argues that love making is an innocent activity. It does not harm anyone. His sighs do not cause storms and sink ships. His tears do not cause any floods. His chills do not affect the weather, and the warmth of his passion does not cause plague. The imagery of the poem is truly metaphysical. Wit springs out from each cluster of phrases. The affection of the lovers is true and all absorbing. They are two bodies but one soul. The analogies in which the lovers are likened to flies and then to eagle and dove and then finally to the phoenix are among the finest instances of Donne's wit. The idea of resurrection of lovers is reinforced by the suggestion that they mysteriously influence the lives of the succeeding generations of men who will come to the master priests of love to evoke their blessing. The poem has a dramatic character too. The you whom the speaker addresses is not identified. Let us imagine that it is a person, perhaps a friend, who objects to the speaker's love affair. At any rate, the person represents the practical world which regards love as a trivial feeling. To use the metaphor on which the poem is built, the friend represents the secular world which the lovers have renounced. The opening of the poem anticipates Browning's method of dramatic monologue. The 5 stanzas of the canonization are metered in iambic lines ranging from trimeter to pentameter. In each of the 9-line stanzas, the first, third, fourth and 7th lines are in pentameter, the second, 5th, 6th and 8th in tetrameter and 9th in trimeter. The rhyme scheme in each stanza is ABBA CCC DD. That's all about the poem The Canonization, written by John Donne. Hope you understood the poem. Thank you for watching.